Hello and welcome to the podcast. This podcast features entirely on the passing of David Wilcock, and it does feature the full statement that the family released about him and his passing, and also at the end of the video section, which the video's on, that has the statement from Stavetti on the passing of David Wilcock as well. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe and comment. Enjoy the podcast. Hello, so in this episode we're looking into the death of David Wilcock. So we'll start with the bio, then go on to a case summary. But just as a quick note, I posted on the community feed, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I stated that I'm also looking into the newly released Pentagon files. And I've read pretty much all of them by now, and I will do a video on this soon. And I've got to say, I was kind of underwhelmed with the video footage, the video files in there, but some of the more wordy files, like the testimonies, the statements, and stuff like that, I found very interesting indeed. And that's something that I might do a little mini series on them, because there's quite a lot of information there, and there is a kind of running theme underneath that I noticed that I think probably would be quite interesting to highlight. So like and subscribe and comment. Here we go. So I'm sure we're all aware of David's work and basic bio. He studied psychology at the State University of New York. His primary focus could really be described as merging scientific concepts with spiritual or metaphysical means. I won't go into the legitimacy of such things in this video though, as I think apart from giving scientific findings, in order to merge these two fields, you kind of have to apply some element of personal beliefs. And I frankly, I don't think it's fair on this channel or my place to have an opinion or to touch on that sort of subject of other people's personal beliefs. David worked heavily in conjunction with the media, frequently appearing on television programs such as Ancient Aliens, and even hosted shows such as Wisdom Teachings on the network Gaia. I think it's pronounced that. He was a published author, a New York Times best-selling author, in fact, known for books such as The Source Field Investigations, The Synchronicity Key, and The Ascension Mysteries. He also maintained an online presence in terms of his YouTube channel. Also, and of note, is his position within Stavetti Aerospace. So here's a quick tangent to this now. As seen here, Stavetti lists Wilcock as the Director of Advanced Technology. I like to look into other members of such companies to get a picture of the company as a whole. So let's look into the chief scientist. That's Robert Sugarman. So we can see here a quick bio of him. So it's listed here, Dr. Robert C. Sugarman. And the introduction, you can see personal injury analyst, and it lists his credentials, BA, MS, SM, PhD in physics and psychology. He's got quite a good educational history. And it says all his area of expertise is here. An expert background, and actually if we look down, you've got a CV here, and it lists again. If we go to this page, you can list it, see his educational background, and you can see BA in physics, maths minor, University of Buffalo, graduate studies is it 1962 for solid state physics and math. That's at Purdue University. And then he seems to lean over to experimental psychology with the physics minor after that, which is quite an interesting crossover actually. Never thought about the maths and physics side and then going over to an experimental psychology side from that. It's quite interesting. And you can see here, this is employment. So his field seems to be psychology and physics. Now let's look at Richard E. Guild, director of the military aerospace within Stavetti. So Kel Surprise is yet another military official in an aerospace company in a senior position. I'll pop up also his LinkedIn. We can see from there he has a master's in aerospace engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology, Graduate School of Engineering and Management, which is located in Dayton, Ohio. Here it is on the map, and here's one in relation to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as well. So Guild, again, doesn't have much of an online presence, but I did find I think he was listed as a captain on here. We can see this part, Captain Richard E. Guild. And this was within the Air Force, as I say. I can't confirm any other ranks. I did see something saying he might have been promoted to colonel later on, but again, I can't really confirm this. But he was a fighter pilot and also fought in Vietnam. So if we go back to Stavetti, and we can see he was Deputy Director of Special Programs, Office Assistant Secretary of the Air Force in Acquisition. and Vice President and Director of Technical Support Services for NSA Inc., much like McCaslin was. Also, a quick note, because he does list SDS International here. So you can see from SDS International, and here's some of the contracts, obviously the US Air Force, Marine Corps, Navy, Army, and also US Space Force. Now, it's not too strange really about these contractors having, contracts obviously with different, like all the military sort of departments within the US Air Force. But it's starting to get a bit weird here, because even in the case of Matthew Sullivan, the company I suspected he worked for did have a crossover with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the acquisition programs as well, much like that of Richard E. Guild and Stavetti. Also, I never done the video on Amy Eskridge's Institute for Exotic Sciences, but there were two high up military officials that worked for that company also. Now, I have to state that I am in no way implying that these have anything to do with any of the unalivals or disappearances. It speaks more to the legitimacy of the companies and the connections that these companies have to the respective cases. Essentially, it's just of note that there is some connection to the UFO and crash retrieval atmosphere, as it were. There was another crossover who worked for Amy's Institute, that of Dr. Deborah Barnhart, who was, sadly passed away, in condolences to her family and friends. She also previously worked at Honeywell, the company I mentioned in the Stephen Garcia case that has the primary contract for the Kansas City National Security Campus, and that he may have subcontracted to them. Deborah was involved in classified satellite work that was largely associated with spacecraft. Also, whilst looking through some files on this case, I found another interesting link to Honeywell. So here you can see this is on Stavetti, and you can see that they source certain components from Honeywell as well. So this isn't too much of a surprise, really. Honeywell's a big company, and a smaller company obviously more likely to source components for that. I mean, that's just inevitability of bigger companies. But as a whole, I suppose these links are a bit weird. And I know I state in each video that inevitably there will be some links, but it's in every case now. It's like a web. And at what point do we start saying, this is a bit strange? Like this one with Stavetti, clear crossover with the acquisition program, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Garcia with Honeywell. Then you've got even company like in Eskridge's case, there was a crossover with Wright-Patterson there. And again with Matthew Sullivan. I've detracted majorly again, so back to the case in hand. That's a good bio summary, I feel, and kind of illustrates that whilst David's personal beliefs and opinions proved somewhat controversial, I think it's safe to say, he was employed by an aerospace contractor. I will state also that the contractor has been noted as a kind of more hopeful contractor in terms of contract acquisition and actual development of proposed designs. But it still has the know-how, as it were, and the people who work there still have very good credentials. So here is the case summary. 10:44 a.m, Boulder County Police receive a call from someone who identified themselves as David Wilcock, stating the following: I need to leave, and I will be to the left of the house. The caller apparently continued to talk about health and financial issues. Apparently, it's noted that he would not respond to the call taker about if he was armed or intended to harm himself. 10:53 a.m. The first deputy arrived in the area and waited outside, away from the property, until backup arrived. This was due to not knowing if he was armed as a precaution. 11:01 a.m. Second deputy arrives. They discuss the situation and make a plan to safely approach the property, then headed towards the residence in their vehicles. 11:04 a.m. David was noted as saying, "I'm sorry to put you through this," and just hung up, just as the officers were on his driveway. 11:04.25. They see David sitting outside his house with a gun against his head. They took cover behind the vehicles. 11:04.42. They hear the firearm being discharged once in an unknown direction. 11:05 a.m. An officer noticed David still holding the gun to his head. 11:05.24. One of the officers commanded him to put the gun down. 11:05.27. One of the officers witnessed the self-unalival. After 11:06, officers asked for numerous additional personnel to respond and assist with searching the area. They searched the property and residence, and apparently to ensure that there were no other people who could be at risk or a threat. No one was found. David was pronounced dead at the scene. April 22nd, the county coroner officially identified David as the person mentioned. Now, it is noted that his family gave a statement, and this is an official statement on Boulder County website. It states the following. I'll leave this up, and you can pause, but I'll narrate for the podcast listeners. I'll just highlight the first section there. David Wilcock took his own life on April 20th, 2026, after a long struggle with depression and overwhelming financial debt. His family and chosen family hope this loss encourages more focused attention to mental health care access. And the rest of the statements read out as part of the podcast. David was born on March 8th, 1973, in Schenectady, New York. During his childhood in upstate New York, he was curious, sensitive, and an introspective child, drawn to reading, science, research, and questions about how the universe works. He spent much of his time journaling and developing a vibrant, imaginative inner life. He laughed easily and had a big heart. He loved animals, meditation, music, scientific study, and lemon cake. From childhood, he had a deep curiosity about telepathy, lucid dreaming, the occult, palmistry, and the predictions of Nostradamus. Like many young people, he experienced painful periods of struggle and difficulty. David grew up in a close-knit family that cherished music and art, was in his first band as a teenager, and played many instruments throughout his life. He developed strong interests in psychology and spirituality, subjects that would later shape his ethos and vocation. He attended State University of New York at New Paltz and received a bachelor's degree in psychology. David spent his life writing extensively about subjects he was deeply invested in. Some of David's most consistent messages concerned the importance of focusing one's energies on service to others and the divinity of all human life. He cultivated a wide community around him based on these tenets. He was known to the world as a New York Times bestselling author with a voluminous body of writing, including the books The Source Field Investigations, The Synchronicity Key, The Ascension Mysteries, Awakening the Dream, and The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, co-authored with Winfrey. David was widely known as a media personality and lecturer examining issues such as UFOs, UAPs, and the paranormal. But this only tells part of the story of a life that, like any other, unfolded through internal struggles, evolving beliefs, and a quest for meaning. David lived in a time shaped by the internet, and he himself shaped a segment of it. This powerful medium of communication magnifies both connection and confusion. Ideas travel quickly, expand logarithmically, and reshape thought structures. In remembering David, it's important to hold more than one truth at once. That some of his work raised concerns about misinformation, and that he was also a person who was on an eternal quest for clarity. Beyond his public persona, he was a human navigating the same complexities and vulnerabilities that shape our lives. His passing is a reminder of how important it is to meet one another with open minds and compassion in our hearts. The loss of a life can turn our focus to shared humanity, whether we agree on life's unanswered questions or not. David's life will be remembered in a myriad of ways by many different people because of the far-reaching nature of his teachings and because he considered his audience a community. While he was known as a charismatic and engaging teacher to fans, those who were closest to him knew the depth of his untreated mental health struggles intimately. Many who knew him from afar have speculated that there is a cover-up involving his death, but we can assure you there was no foul play. If you or someone you know is battling with thoughts of suicide, call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, to honour David's memory and to support others experience mental health struggles. Donations may be made in his name to the Crisis text line, www.crisistextline.org, or the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, www.afsp.org, the family of David Wilcock. The quite touching words there from his family, and it does go to highlight they were aware of his mental health struggles, and they do state that the family around him were aware of that as well. His friends, close friends, and family. So here we have a case which has the independent witnesses, the officers, the call log of the moment, confirmation of the struggles he faced, the depression, the financial woes. I do find the police action of asking for more officers and searching if anyone else was a threat strange, but also it's better to err on the side of caution in such a scenario. And it can probably be commended to these officers that they were so cautious. Look, these cases are strange, and the links to the defence contractors, the military, specifically Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, it's weird. It was noted about David's comment saying he wasn't, in a self-unalival headspace, as it were. I can't really say the other thing on YouTube due to the algorithm. But this was a while before the incident. Further to this, there's no psychological evidence, as far as I'm aware of, that just because someone states this means they are not in that headspace. I don't believe it proves the converse either. Just because if he states this, it does not mean that there was some sort of cognitive dissonance and he was actually thinking about this. I think in terms of mental health and these types of situations, things are a lot more nuanced than that. And the fact his family are aware of these things carries more weight. These are people that generally know someone the most, people's family, and know generally what their responses are like and what's in and out of character. So again, all the evidence says that this was a tragic case, but yet underlying these, there are these strange connections. I'm aware that it's inevitable that these would exist, but even in this case, there's a link. I get Matthew Sullivan, I get Monica Reza and the others. It's a big industry. It's all interwoven, but it's kind of a scaled down workforce and secretive as well. But there is a lot of connections between these. I think ultimately, when we look things through a certain lens, these coincidences can become overbearing, as it were. It's hard to see them as coincidences, but that's the very nature of coincidences. The word exists for a reason. Maybe the fact the word exists at all isn't a coincidence. Maybe it is. I feel again this is a tragic case, and I know I've said that a few times on several cases, and believe me, I do question myself on when these things stop becoming tragedies and start becoming something more sinister. As I say, there are connections there, and it is weird, these connections, but each case in isolation, when you look at it, there's valid sort of evidence behind it. I mean, ultimately, as I say, in all of them, we don't know, and I think it's up to each of us to kind of make up our own conclusions of this, and I'm just here to kind of present stuff to you. So this is the statement by Stavetti Aerospace on the passing of David Wilcock, dated 27th of April 2026. On Saturday 25th, I attended the 21st AIAA Southern California Aerospace Systems and Technology, SoCal ASAT conference at the University of California, Irvine, as a speaker. David Wilcock was supposed to accompany me at 4:30. I presented Stavetti's SM-31 Stiletto Advanced Supersonic Trainer and Light Fighter aircraft. David was scheduled to be in the audience supporting our presentation and attendance. This was to be one of many past and future aerospace industry events that David participated in, both as a representative of Stavetti and as a director on our board. My family and I had hoped to host David as a guest at our California home during this day. David was not only to participate in the ASAT conference, but also to undergo a diagnosis of alleged yet unconfirmed physical health conditions and, if necessary, begin treatment at a clinic in Santa Monica. He was also going to assist as a member of our proposal team in the drafting of our response to the US Navy Undergraduate Jet Training System, UJTS RFP, to be submitted to NavAir on the 29th of June 2026. David and I spoke of many plans for near-term events and activities ranging from a proposed open house and hangar exhibition the weekend of June 20th in Niagara Falls, New York, to his engagement in the September 2026 AFA Air Space and Cyber Conference in National Harbor, MD. Focused also upon film production, David and I were eagerly awaiting the anticipated release of the documentary Levitation as well as the creation of feature films, documentaries, conferences, and launches, as he called them, focused upon both aerospace and advanced technologies. It was with great sorrow and horror that we learned David had died on Monday the 20th, after repeated attempts to connect with him following a missed phone call at 9:37 a.m. David's passing has left a tremendous void and a massive amount of unrealised experience and potential. During the Saturday presentation, a Stvetti Aerospace org chart was featured on page 34 of our SM31 Stiletto briefing. This chart outlined our military aerospace, commercial aerospace, and general aviation divisions. It also clearly identified Stvetti's interplanetary and interstellar divisions. Later, during the QA session, I was asked by a university student attending the conference about the interstellar division and what its focus was. I explained that while the interplanetary division concentrated upon the design and production of future traditional launch vehicles, including rockets, space shuttles, and future single stage to orbit systems to explore the solar system, the focus of the interstellar division was to conduct the bleeding edge development of future interstellar transportation systems, starships that can travel beyond the solar system into interstellar space. I mentioned that it was under this division that Stvetti had responded to DARPA's 100-year Starship RFI in 2010, and that the focus was achieving interstellar space travel within the lifetime of my children. Our motto is Warp Drive by 2045. That Q&A response resulted in excitement, enthusiasm, and joy. It isn't every day that a real-life aerospace company announces that it has a division focused upon interstellar starships and warp drive. It's tremendously encouraging to discover that there exists a serious professional desire to explore these possibilities and create a future where science fiction transitions into mainstream science fact. David Wilcock served as Stvetti's Director of Advanced Technologies, a multidisciplinary position which included his direct participation in Stvetti's interplanetary and interstellar divisions. Within these business areas, David could allow his specific professional interests and talents to flourish, with a focus upon the realization, introduction, development, and production of highly advanced, future-defining exotic technologies related to propulsion, energy creation, and ultimately space travel. David has been categorized as a UFO researcher. As stated within his author bio, David has been professionally recognized as an author, professional filmmaker, and researcher of ancient civilizations, consciousness science, and new paradigms of matter and energy. The New York Times bestselling author of the Source Field Investigations, The Synchronicity Key, and The Ascension Mysteries, David served as a consulting producer and regular contributor to the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, appearing in more than 600 television episodes as well as millions of views through YouTube videos and articles. Stvetti was focused on providing David with the opportunity and environment where he could transition his talents and abilities from entertaining an audience into being a researcher and communicator who could serve as a serious contributor with real subject matter that he could affect change in his life within his lifetime, going beyond the hypothetical and esoteric. This meant providing David with a mechanism whereby real hardware could be developed from first principles into actual prototyped, qualified, and production products within a group he could work with consisting of qualified aerospace industry professionals. This represented a shift from speculative possibilities to spectacular yet specific realities. This is where David was given a unique opportunity through Stvetti, and in doing so, he found a new direction different than he had ever experienced prior to 2018. At one point during his early days with Stvetti, David shared with me a 3-view drawing of a vehicle that he was told was a spacefighter by a person close to him with whom he had worked many times on air in the past. He will remain unidentified, but the insider was not very good at differentiating between a spacefighter and a cancelled Navy attack aircraft. The insider was attempting to convince David that he had a super secret knowledge by sharing with David a line drawing of the A-12 Avenger II with its carrier landing hook deployed. David was highly suspicious of the drawing and information, but at the time he was not an aviation expert. I swiftly identified the aircraft for David and shared with him the history of the A-12 program. At that point, David realized beyond any shadow of a doubt that the insider had been misinforming him for many years and did not have the secret information he claimed, especially regarding alleged off-planet experiences and fabled interfaces with secret space alliance. David continued to break ties with that individual, shifting his attention and focus while discovering the real history of breaking through aviation. Along with the cancelled A-12 Avenger II, this was one of the many eye-opening discoveries for David as his career and understanding of the world evolved. During his time with Staveti, David made a major change in who he worked with. Undoubtedly upset some of the people in the UFO and disclosure community, but David's focus migrated to the reality of aerospace and not with investigating alleged insider accounts. David moved from exploring the tales of William Tompkins to studying the conceptual aircraft design of Dan Raymer. Change does not happen overnight, nor does understanding. With an emphasis placed upon arriving at technologies that can be mass-produced and sold as functional products, the goal was no longer to tell a story or explore mythology, but to design and create tangible products. While David was not expected to design, build, or engineer, he was expected to research and develop the skill set necessary to distinguish between what was real, repeatable phenomena that could lead to a production article versus something purely conjectural. He was also expected to provide insightful contributions regarding the ethics and viable business model for specific technologies. This he archived, and he did so with stunning detail. As a renowned celebrity figure, David was given the opportunity to be on the ground floor of the planning and conceptualization of real aircraft and space hardware, including propulsion systems and spacecraft. That is like a dream come true, but the expectation was not only to talk about it, but to achieve real things. This fostered David's deep dive exploration, study, and significant understanding of advanced and exotic technologies, ranging from charge clusters to and exotic vacuum objects, EVOs, to the other patents of Salvador Pay and even advanced high-performance metamaterials. These are all elements that ultimately may find a direct application in future interplanetary and interstellar spacecraft. In doing so, David's public interactions shifted from the speculative to an attempt to achieve a clear comprehension of advanced technologies that have been or were being proven in the lab, and how those technologies result in deployable manufactured products with a sound business case. Staveti Corporation was founded on the 20th of July 1994. Staveti Aerospace of Minnesota was incorporated in April 2014. David became the 28th shareholder of Staveti Aerospace Limited of Minnesota in 2018 when he joined the Staveti board as one of 17 directors. When Staveti Aerospace Limited of Wyoming was organized in December 2019, David was issued common stock in the new company as the 23rd founding shareholder, serving as one of 14 member board. David began directly investing in Staveti Aerospace Limited after he had already joined the board of directors, contributing directly into the company as well as co-founding qualified accredited investor between April 2019 and February 2024. David's peak investment, which constituted 87% of all his monies invested, was between October 2020 and January 2021. This coincided with the purchase of 9,400 Porter Road and the expenses associated with that acquisition. In so doing, David was a significant force in the acquisition of Staveti's headquarters and prototyping center in Niagara Falls, New York. David invested substantially into Western New York with a focus upon not only creating new aircraft, but reviving an aerospace presence that had greatly diminished with the closure of the Bell Aerospace Texarton plant less than a mile away from Staveti's former US ARC facility. In support of the business deployment, a portion of David's investment was directly applied to addressing government relations, consulting services paid to Rosscap Holdings LLC in September 2020, led by President Rabbi Yehuda Kaplan, current US Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Roscap Holdings had a team that included Ed Russo and Mick Mulvaney, and resulted in initial communications with Peter Navarro, in which David engaged directly during a 2-day October 2020 meeting at the Trump International Hotel, Washington, D.C. There was much that could be recounted regarding this meeting and the significant role David played through his attendance. David engaged in many meetings with Stavetti, ranging from aerospace industry team Zoom calls to our sponsorship and presentation at the 2025 Air Dominance Summit in Henderson, Nevada. David had transitioned significantly from a researcher and content creator to a capable business professional over the 8 years he was director. While we were all encouraged to embrace personal change and broaden our horizons, in practice many failed to do so. David actually did. David Wilcock of 1992, 2002 and 2012 was a remarkably different person in terms of individual growth, business acumen, technical knowledge and contributions than the David Wilcock of 2022 and even 1 week ago. David also experienced a personal spiritual transition from aspects of New Age philosophy into a Christian-focused worldview, while at the same time exploring the nature of the universe. One may ask what qualifications David Wilcock had to serve on the board of directors of an aerospace company. Aside from being a 7-figure investor, which is often the only standard that many new and ascending companies require for their directors, David had developed a comprehensive understanding of the aerospace industry and even NASA history. David could explain how Stavetti aircraft flew and operated in great detail to a crowd of Air Force officers who often had far less understanding of aviation than he did. David had the unique ability to quickly study and master nearly any topic. And while he focused on the esoteric on a personal basis, his work for Stavetti rested heavily upon the technical understanding. That cannot be said of many directors of other companies. Recently, a certified public accountant was appointed to the board of directors of a very significant multi-billion-dollar utility company. Reviewing this new board member, in my personal opinion, it could be argued that the board member is completely unsuited to serve on the board of the utility. It is very plain upon studying the situation that David Wilcock has far more appropriate skill set to serve on the board of a utility than the candidate I'm referring to. The truth of the matter is that many corporate boards are populated by people who genuinely are not qualified in any technical or business capacity to serve on those boards. They may have a direct financial stake as a significant investor, which enables them to serve on the board, but in terms of actual cognitive abilities, aptitudes and skill sets, many board members are simply lacking. And as a result, poor decisions which can negatively impact the lives of millions are made by these people. David Wilcock was morally grounded. During the last years of his life, David focused upon living a very good life. David was not a user of alcohol, tobacco, or even chocolate. He had eliminated to a large degree as much sugar from his diet as possible and literally drank mountain spring water. David was very focused on his health and eating well, with some of the finest home-cooked meals being those I had while visited David. If you watched David's shows, you saw this change, and the result was a far more serious individual who was capable of using investigative skills to begin creating tangible good. In 2024, David began playing a more technical role with Stavetti. He was directly involved in supporting the Stavetti SM-31 Stiletto as our potential solution for the US Navy Undergraduate Jet Training System, UJTS, an aircraft to replace the T-45 Goshawk. In this capacity, David had entered into a CUI agreement with Navarre and was participating in industry day meetings and events throughout 2025. David was directly involved in the support side of Stavetti's entry into the USAF Future Tanker Program, focused on our SM-940K wide buoy airborne tanker, as well as our low observable SM-635 stealth tanker, also at the CUI level. To lighten the mood, a standing statement was that While the B2 and B21 did not use electrogravitic propulsion, our SM-635 just might. While David did not design or engineer these aircraft, he supported them in a manner that no Boeing or Lockheed Martin board member ever would. As a hands-on contributor focused on advancing the program to the extent of his skills and abilities enabled. These programs will continue, but throughout their program history, we'll never forget the role that David played in helping foster them into existence. There were many great things on the horizon for David. Beyond his professional excellence, David was a warm, gifted, and deeply loving person whose positive presence and hopeful attitude enriched our team. Nearly everyone associated with Stavetti knew him in this light. Distinct from any public persona, and we were privileged to experience his intelligence, kindness, generosity, and unwavering dedication. David will be extremely missed by all of us who love him. Our hearts and our company are considerably broken with his passing. We are devastated by this loss and extend our profound condolences to David's family, loved ones, and everyone whose life he touched. David died at the genesis of something wonderful. In the words of James T. Kirk, "Of my friend, I can only say this. Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human." Christopher R. Beskar, founder and president CEO of Stavetti Aerospace Limited. Okay, so something of note initially is the amount that David Wilcock invested. It was a seven-figure investment, and this would have been the final amount of investment, I think, would probably be about, 2019, I think they said, when they acquired a certain building that they operated in. So now at this period in time, I think given the current revenue, as far as I can see, is only listed as about 3 million. At that time, it probably was a lot less, in which case for a $3 million sort of company, you're kind of looking at most total sort of assets about maybe 15 million at most. So then you kind of backscale that to that point in time, and it becomes a lot less, in which case it could be hypothesized that David could have been a majority shareholder. And I think perhaps that's why in this statement they kind of go along the lines of, look, he might have been a heavy investor, but this wasn't why we incorporated him into the board of members. Whether that's true or whether it's not, I don't know. No one can say definitively. The statement does seem to almost take quite a corporate view of things and state things in a manner which I would have focused more on, like the final part of the statement, the condolences and his character and, that kind of thing. And I think they did kind of go into a bit of corporate speak, but, it is a company at the end of the day. One thing also of note as well, in terms of the revenue and recent events, in March 2023, there is a kind of lawsuit going on at the moment. I'm not sure how much I can talk about because it's still ongoing, and we know David has financial troubles or concerns. So kind of in regarding this case that's ongoing, it's in relation to about a $1 million investment into the Stavetti Ukraine section of the company, which is quite admirable because they want to upgrade the MiG-29's modernization for NATO compatibility, but which is pretty admirable for them. But the thing is, like an aerospace defense company who's kind of struggling with this $1 million kind of, I suppose you could say, contested return on investment, it says that the company might not be performing financially as well as what, investors would hope, which I think, and this is, I just say, this refers to the ongoing case, which again, I don't know how much I can talk about in terms of that, the lawsuit, but it does illustrate, I think, a financial concern there for a company. And obviously with David Wilcock highly likely investing so much money in the company, has that caused some extra stress? More than likely, especially financial stress is a massive factor in these sort of things. So that is an aspect. So, in summary, I think the company almost kind of just in this statement almost justifies really several things about the investments and the appointment of David Wilcock within the company. And for me personally, in something like this, I would have focused more on the condolences and the personal side. But as I said, it is a company. It's just something of note. I mean, it's just to include in the podcast, so you've got like a whole picture sort of thing of anything that's kind of I feel relevant. But yeah, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe, and see you next time.